All right, so the monster who targeted and shot one Minnesota state lawmaker and his wife and murdered a Minnesota state leader, her husband, and their beloved rescue dog has finally been captured by police. So let me just make this clear. I do not care if he's a MAGA guy or a Walz guy or all of the above or none of the above or a space alien. He's a monster. And I also want to read every single word of his manifesto and know every piece of his motivation. You see, Democrats, it's not that hard to do. No buts, no I get it, no nothing. Y'all should try it sometime. Like you, Tim Walz. You know, it's great to see you're condemning political violence now because in the last few months of your loser press tour, you've said some pretty rotten stuff.
This
How do you fight it?
This
I
notion
think
of
I could kick most of their I do that if they wanted to. I know I can run them, but I don't know if we're going to fall into that place where we want to. Okay, we challenge you to a WWE fight here type of thing. I called out on this because I called Donald Trump a wannabe dictator. It's because he is. It's because he is. Oh. The governor's being mean and the governor's speaking out on that. Well, maybe it's time for us to be a little meaner. Maybe it's time for us to be a little more fierce. Because we have to ferociously push back on this. And again, I'll speak to my teacher colleagues in here. The thing that bothers a teacher more than anything is to watch a bully, to watch this bully and to stop it. And when it's a child, you talk to them and you tell them why bullying's wrong. But when it's adult like Donald Trump, you bully the out of him back.
Donald Trump's modern-day Gestapo is scooping folks up off the streets. They're in unmarked vans, wearing masks, being shipped off to foreign torture dungeons. No chance to mount a defense, not even a chance to kiss a loved one goodbye, just grabbed up by masked agents, shoved into those vans, and disappeared. To be clear, there's no way for us to know whether they were actually criminals or not.
But it's not just Timmy Tampon Walz. The left has lost all credibility when it comes to condemning political violence. You know, it was less than a year ago, our great president, then former president and current leading candidate Donald Trump was within a millimeter of losing his life to an assassin's bullet, and yet you still call him a Nazi, a fascist, an existential threat, and a dictator, and your minions still cheer on his demise. But even MSNBC had to note that his weekend parade celebrating the U.S. military was honorable and classy.
One thing I will say, I want to go back to you, Allie, that again, when we talk about this sort of tension in the country, and sometimes, you know, you and I have both been at Trump rallies, those can be, you know, very tense, a kind of, I would say, like kind of a dark, malevolent energy sometimes in them. Not always, but it doesn't seem like that's the energy on the mall today, which I think is a good sign, right?
Correct. That you're really correct about that, Chris, and it's something we were watching for. Yeah. I'm just sort of surprised by the number of people who were at the front of the parade, watching, cheering, and then would come and ask to take a selfie.
Yeah, right.
This is a very different mood here.
Yeah.
People seem to be going out of their way to say that they're here to celebrate the Army's 250th birthday. Now, there are people walking around with signs. A moment ago, while you were talking to Jen, guy just came around and said, Trump 2028. And I said, how does that work exactly? And he's like laughing and had a big flag on him. So there's some politicization here, but it is not, it's not dark. It's not tense. It's not amped up. It's different. It's different from covering a Trump rally.
Well, imagine that. Look what happens when you actually interact with Trump supporters. But we cannot say the same about the left's little weekend shindigs. Get it together. You're embarrassing yourselves more than normal. But it is Liberal Tuesday, so here to defend his side is former South Carolina Congressman Joe Cunningham. All right, Joe, I got to go right to the weekend, right? Because I am still so taken aback at the contrast, right? I know that a lot of Democrats, I don't know where you stand on it, they didn't like the military parade. They didn't like that we're celebrating the 250th anniversary of the United States Army. They would much rather march around with Trump piñatas in the streets of LA and other major cities. Now, I looked at the two scenes here, and I tried to be objective and fair, but one of them looked to be pretty patriotic. The other one looked to be, a little rabid and a little hateful. So I'm wondering your take on the two weekend activities.
Well, thanks for having me on, Tommy. And, as far as the guy who will defend the left at all times, I'm not sure you picked the right guest for that particular point of view. And look, I've been critical of my own party at times. You know, when I think about this weekend, I think about the two parades, the similarity too, in the sense that here we're celebrating the strength of, you know, our armed forces, our Army, 250 years that has given Americans the liberties and freedoms, much like the one that is being exercised all across the country, right? The right to peacefully assembly. And that peacefully is the key word. And, you know, I think it would have gone a long way had the Democrats acknowledged, you know, the parade, acknowledged this anniversary and the liberties and the freedoms that our men and women in uniform who are serving overseas are fighting to protect those same liberties that we're exercising. But you know, these types of protests in one form or another happen every weekend, right? On some topic or another. People are protesting nonstop across our country. It's a right. But it's important to remember to peacefully protest is the key part of that.
Yeah, and you know, there were some peaceful folks, obviously. You know, I would still call them rabid because I really don't know what their protest is about. I'm not sure they can clearly articulate it. So it's supposed to be no kings. So the whole premise there is no kings. You know, President Trump is throwing a military parade for his birthday. Well, it wasn't. It was to celebrate the Army. That was pretty clear to anyone who was there or anybody who watched it. So this whole notion of no kings, I'm not sure exactly what they mean by that. But I also don't know if they could articulate why they were out there. Is it for the illegal immigrants again? Is it for BLM? Is it for LGBTQ? Is it for Hamas? You're right. There is a protest seemingly every day or every weekend when it comes to what the left is angry and bitter about. But I don't really know what this last weekend, I don't really know if they could pinpoint what it was about, but they're so proud of themselves for getting a big crowd. And that's what they keep emphasizing is, oh, the military parade didn't have as many people as we had across the country, you know, denouncing President Trump. Like, is that really a flex point? Is that really something to celebrate? I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, two things. Number one, I think you're right. The media spun this whole parade up as Trump's birthday parade. That's what it was painted as. And the videos that I saw paint a different narrative. I think it came out much different than anyone else expected, including probably Trump himself. Right. As far as what they're protesting, I think it's a sign of venting, for lack of a better word. You know, but the fact is that the issues that I think the left or Democrats want to see a different leadership on, those are solved at the ballot box, right? And there's no ballot box that is currently open right now. So this is just a form of venting frustrations and signaling protest. But if if the Democratic Party was serious about change or new leadership, then it'd be looking at different policies to support. It'd be looking at different ideas. It'd be looking at different ways of speaking to voters or even listening to them. I mean, we saw, in the 2024 election, just the undermining of democracy by when Biden pulled out in the coronation of Kamala Harris. I mean, it circumvented the idea of a democratic process. It left Democratic voters without even a choice as to who they want to lead the party. And so I think there's a real issue of credibility right now with the party and its voters. And Tommy, I would view that, you got to view that relationship between voters and a party as similar to other relationships, right? You have to build that trust, and building that trust takes being honest with folks. And I think that this 2024 past election cycle has done a great deal of damage to that trust between voters and the Democratic Party. And I think they need to work on rebuilding that.
Yeah, they're always so angry too. I don't understand. I think the left is always angry. They're always bitter. They're always acting out. You know, they had their guy for 4 years and they were angry then. And they were, of course, that was anti-Jewish, anti-Israel. It's like they're always mad about something. I just don't see that on the right. And now, again, I know that Democrats like to go, January 6th, January 6th. Okay, I'll give you January 6th. But it was 6 hours. And that's really the only example the left can give me of when conservatives or right-wingers act out in that way. I don't see them doing this, certainly not at the same frequency as the left, which they're always mad about something.
I personally have encountered a lot of hate on both sides. Last couple of years, since I spoke out against President Biden running for re-election, I was the first Democrat to come out and say he shouldn't run. They should step aside for new leadership. And I was shocked at the amount of hate and vitriol that received. And this is supposed to be coming from the Big Tent party. And if we're talking about having a diverse party, a party with diverse ideas and diverse people and backgrounds, then there has to be that Big Tent that allows for a diversity of thought. And the party seemed to just fold around. Okay, it's Biden or it's nothing. And then after Biden stepped aside, it's Kamala or nothing. I think deferring opinions could be welcomed in with a much better attitude, as opposed to simply kicking people out or disparaging folks, speaking to them in a different way. The way that the far left is talking down to voters, Trump voters particularly. And I live in South Carolina, Tommy. I know, you grew up in a rural area. I think you're in Nashville now. We're around a lot of people who voted for, either Harris or Trump. South Carolina is more so Trump. But casting everybody as a bad person or a person who, took part in undermining democracy simply because they supported Trump is a losing strategy. Speaking down to these people as if they don't know what they're voting for, and or chastise them, say, why are you voting on the border when you don't live in a border state? And I see it on MSNBC, I see it on CNN, I see it more and more. When I served in Congress, I don't know if I was more insulated or I just thought that, okay, these things don't happen as often. But since upon leaving Congress and watching cable news and watching these networks, I can see the animosity that it breeds among regular voters when they turn on the TV and they're spoken down to or they're chastised to by their leaders.
Yeah. You said it's on the left and the right. I don't really see it so much on the right. Again, outside of the 6 hours of January 6th, which the left will continue to go down that same road. It's already been litigated. If people really cared that much about January 6th, Trump wouldn't have won again. So there's that. I hope that at some point the left can just get over that one, but I don't think so. It's never going to happen. It's the only thing they have. I want to get your take, though, because you don't sound like a Democrat to me. I'll be honest, Joe. You don't sound like a Democrat. So I guess let's try to find some areas where maybe you are a Democrat. President Trump is vowing to really flood the zone in these big blue cities with ICE agents. He said the raids are not going to stop. We've got to, get rid of the illegal aliens that are in these sanctuary cities, the worst first. But listen, if you come upon a murderer and a rapist and he's in a house full of other illegal aliens, guess what? They got to go too. It's unfortunate that they chose to come into this country that way. But again, that's the law. So it's a very lengthy post there. So where do you stand in terms of Trump's immigration approach? Do you think he's doing the right thing?
Well, 97% of Americans agree these. Let's step back and we'll take this in two parts, right? 97% of Americans agree that those violent illegal immigrants should be deported. No questions asked. The rubber hits the road when other people are caught up in the dragnet, nonviolent offenders, people whose only infraction is entering the country illegally. And for a variety of reasons. Some Democrats claim it's for humane reasons. Some Democrats say it's for the economy. But we're also a country of limited resources where those law enforcement resources should be prioritized. And I think majority of Americans agree that the priority here lies with those violent offenders. Anybody seeking to do Americans harm should be removed from this country. And so when you see things on TV, whether they're poaching immigrants outside of Home Depot or in these other areas,
so let's be fair, they're not immigrants. So this is something that fires me up. And I've been noticing, especially on social media, that a lot of Democrats who are not as level-headed as you, they oftentimes they say what you just said. They say they're coming after immigrants. They're not coming after immigrants. They're coming after illegal immigrants. So I don't know why Democrats, if they're okay with illegal immigrants coming into this country,
I'm fine saying illegal immigrants, Tom. You're not going to offend me by saying that.
Why does the left not say that though? Why do they say that Trump is coming after immigrants? Because that's what they say.
I saw that. You remember when Biden came after the State of the Union, where he caught a lot of hell for not saying illegal immigrants, and he backtracked on that. Yeah, it was kowtowing to the far left, which I think most Americans would say, yeah, there's not a problem with that. There's not a problem with saying they entered this country illegally, illegal immigrants. The language police on the left has gotten out of control. And saying creating these new words, Latinx or all these different words that normal people don't speak in, or they don't know what it means, and they have no desire to learn what it means either. And Trump's language, to his credit, has been very basic and very, very communicative, and he doesn't have to mince words. But when we start modifying this language, language is our best connecting to people, and I think Democrats have not done as good a job in the last several years because we aspire to be inclusive of everyone, even when we start excluding people who don't know what different words mean, or might be, offended by leaving out illegal immigrants.
Well, but your original point was that you support getting the criminals out, but don't go to the don't go to the Home Depots, don't go to the farms, don't go to this. And I understand what you're saying from an empathetic point of view. It's like, listen, these people just want to work, and I feel for people who want to come to this country and they want to work hard. But I've said it many times, and I'll say it again, and I wonder your take on it. Even nonviolent illegal immigration is not a victimless crime. It comes at a cost. You mentioned resources. Yes, these people might not have committed further crimes when they're there, but they're still stressing our resources. And in my opinion, Democrats have really abandoned the American worker because they're saying we want illegal aliens to come in here and do these jobs for less, therefore not only taking jobs from American citizens, but also undercutting American citizens because the illegals are willing to do it for less. So when Democrats say, and I hear it all the time, is that Americans don't want to do these jobs. Yes, not for that price, but Americans will work hard and they will do difficult jobs and they will do dirty jobs and manual jobs. They will do it for a fair price, a price that allows them to feed their family and to support their livelihood. They won't do it for slave labor wages. So I don't understand why Democrats so fiercely support having a permanent serf class of illegal aliens doing these jobs. Do you think that that's a winning message?
I think there are certain jobs that's extremely hard to find Americans to do. I mean, I grew up in rural Western Kentucky. I've housed tobacco, baled hay. That's hard work, Tommy. Like, I think you grew up in a rural area as well. And you talk to those farmers, they're not getting Americans to do the job, period. There's not. And they can pay them $2 or $3, $5 more an hour. They're still not getting them to do it. So there are certain sectors of the economy, especially out west in California and other states, that are heavily reliant on this. So, there's an economic issue, but there's also the emotional one. And I don't know how you feel about DACA recipients, but when I was in Congress, we fought to make that permanent because I viewed these people who were brought into this country at no fault of their own, through no choice of their own. The idea of them being deported to a foreign country where they may not have ever been or might not even speak the language, I found that appalling. And so, we can't paint everybody with a broad brush, right?
Joe,
I mean, we can talk about
President Trump was willing to make a deal on DACA, but Nancy wouldn't give him that win. Nancy wouldn't do it. She wouldn't support funding for the wall. She wouldn't support increased immigration enforcement and border security. So that was on the table, but Nancy would not give President Trump the win during his first term. So that's why the DACA folks were left on the table there. So again, I understand what you're saying here, and I feel for these people, but I also feel more for the American people. And I know that there's a lot of jobs that Americans don't want to do, but it's also because illegal aliens are filling them for a cut rate. So at some point you have to address it, because there was a time in this country when those jobs were filled by Americans until our industries became dependent and addicted to illegal immigrant labor. I don't know why Democrats are sticking up for big ag and big corporations who want to pay illegals for less, but it seems to be their party position. I have a lot to talk to you about, though.
Tommy, Congress should solve this then. I don't think that should be within the realm of the president, because when you have Democratic president, Republicans are going to be complaining about that and vice versa. I agree with what President Bush said months back, which is this is a problem that Congress should solve. And Republicans right now have control of the House, the Senate, and the executive branch, and they have an opportunity to solve it. And I think they should.
Yeah, I think they should, too. But I also think that there's a lot that has been done by this president that the last president could have done, chose not to. I believe that border was left open by design. So that's wrapping up the immigration.
Do you think that bill should have been signed or should have been passed that President Trump
No,
ultimately
absolutely
said,
not. The bipartisan border bill that basically codified allowing 5,000 as a normal amount before the border could be shut down. Absolutely not. That was a trash bill. We didn't need it. Now, do we need immigration reform? Absolutely. But President Trump has been able to secure that border without the so-called bipartisan border bill that also allowed for illegal immigrants to get their lawyers. I'm not going to pay for this crap. So I understand that that was like a little Bandaid thing, and it was like, it's so bad, this would be better than what we had. But President Trump was right to say, no, I'm going to be president, and I'm going to fix it the right way. And we're not having this trash bill in place that codifies allowing a smaller invasion. So
the point I want to make, though, and I think you agree with me, lasting change will only be done through congressional action.
correct,
you
because
can have
Democrats
the
will
president
never
make
enforce
this,
the border on their own. You're right.
But
They won't.
if well, from President Biden, I mean, look, there's no disputing the difference between Biden and Trump. I mean, he won the election based upon that. So
Yeah.
that's
But Democrats have not learned, Joe. They have not learned one bit. So when they're out there going
they have a few years. They have a few years to figure it out, Tommy. You know, I have to admit, you know, seeing had the responses to the whole process of Biden carrying on through the election and Kamala Harris. I mean, I'm incredibly frustrated with that. And again, this goes back to that trust with voters, right? Like, how do you restore that trust? Number one, I think you got to acknowledge the problem. Democratic voters turn their backs on, Democrats turn their back on voters as it relates to immigration, as it relates to the economy. They told them, you know, don't worry about the economy. It's fine. They told them, don't worry about immigration. It's not that big of a deal. They said, don't worry about Biden. He's not that old. Don't believe what you see with your eyes or hear with your ears. And so there's that trust that's been fractured. So how do you rebuild that trust? And it starts with acknowledging those wrongs, but also you know, you played the clip about Tim Walz and his, Governor Walz and his view on how to combat Trump. And look, it's the same narrative that Democrats have been playing for the last 8 years. Combat Trump, fight back against Trump. I think voters and the Democratic Party especially is looking for new ideas and bold ideas. The party's been trying this push back against Trump and tell people how bad he is for years and years now. And it's not a winning message. It may get people fired up and it may increase the crowds that protest, but I wish the Democratic Party would think in a more bold way and start thinking about what new ideas they can offer to voters instead of the same ones.
Yeah, it doesn't seem that they're interested in that. I've been saying it for the last few weeks. I quite frankly think that Democrat leadership is bored with everyday Americans. I don't think that they're excited or titillated by the issues that impact people on a daily basis. I think they'd rather talk about trans
Sorry, it's probably gonna have to come from outside. It's probably gonna have to come from it's the same Democratic leaders who are saying the same thing, who aren't willing to acknowledge the problems and the issues. It's going to probably take new leadership.
Yeah,
and we'll see what that.
They're going to have to have been born like yesterday, because everybody that's currently in the Democrat Party,
not according to the Constitution, though, Tommy.
Yeah, I know. That's why you guys are in for a real pickle. It doesn't sound to me like you're a Democrat at all. That's why you'll never be able to win as a Democrat, because you don't sound like a Democrat and you're not far left enough, and you're not even close to being far left enough. I mean, you actually could pass for a moderate Republican in my eyes, just based on a lot of the things that you're saying. I think that you probably more conservative than like Murkowski and Collins, but that's for another discussion.
Well, and the gerrymandering in our country has done the United States a huge disservice too, Tommy, because oftentimes there's 435 congressional districts. How many are competitive on a given year? 10, 12 or so? And so you have the extremes in both parties saying the most extreme things so they can make it through the primary, because that's the only competitive race they have in their election.
Yeah.
And Democrats and Republicans do it. So, and that's but people don't really seem to care about it.
Out of curiosity, maybe I don't get it because I'm a conservative, but out of curiosity, what extreme things do Republicans say? What would you think would be an extreme position for Republicans?
I find that Senator Mike Lee's post about Governor Walz and Nightmare on Wall Street extremely distasteful. You know, when somebody, like you said at the very beginning of the segment, when somebody loses a life, it doesn't matter their political ideology.
No, I agree with you on certain things that Republicans have said. I mean, you've got Boebert and you've got Nancy Mace. They can say inflammatory things. I'm not disagreeing with you. What policy positions do you think Republicans have taken that are extreme?
Well, I mean, here in South Carolina, it's a red state. They've essentially outlawed any access to abortion after 6 weeks. And as you know, most times women don't even know they're pregnant or can't even get in to see an OB before 10, 12 weeks or so. So that's extremely out of step with not just Democratic women, but most Republican women as well. And I went to our state, and a lot of women, were in lockstep with a lot of Republican ideas and policies, but they found that one to be so counter to this idea of Republican independence, liberty, let women have control of their own body. I mean, it is hard to, it's a word or phrase, circle that peg or,
Yeah. Well, I don't disagree
reconcile
with you
those.
on that point. I've been very critical of that. I'm somebody who doesn't believe in
And
the
you've seen,
extreme
Tommy,
abortion.
the repercussions and speaking
Yeah.
out. I'm sorry. Sorry
No,
to cut you
you're
off.
exactly right. And I think that's why we didn't do well when we were supposed to have the red wave in 2022. I think it was primarily because of Roe v. Wade and because of the messaging around abortion. So I'll give you that one. But I don't know what other extreme positions on the right. I mean, deport illegal aliens, all illegal aliens, that might seem extreme to Democrats. But to me, it's like, okay, people who came here illegally, yeah, you broke the law, you got to go. I mean, you're up for removal. Unless Congress wants to pass a bill that says if you came in here illegally, that's fine. At this point, you're illegal and you're subject for removal. The last thing I do want to ask you about, though, because I want to get to one other topic, and that's what's going on with Israel and Iran. So this is an issue that I don't think is partisan, because you've got Republicans that are like, no war, like in no way, shape, or form or we want to go to war. And then you've also got those on the left that are like, no war. But then you've also got hawks on both sides who maybe stand with Israel, or they want more U.S. involvement. So I don't even think it's a left versus right thing anymore. What's your particular take on it? Do you think that the United States should be more or less involved in Israel's campaign to take out Iran's nuclear capability?
I mean, I've always been very pro-Israel, and you look at my rating and my voting record. I've always stood with Israel and know that it's an anchor of democracy over the Middle East. It does give me great pause when I see what's going on, Tommy, especially like how old I'm, 43. So I grew up in this area where a lot of my friends were getting sent over to Iraq and Afghanistan, and we just got out of the Middle East. After 20 plus years over there, and the idea that we may get pulled back in, it just feels like deja vu. And so, look, I don't think Iran should have nuclear weapons. I think Israel has the right to exist. But I'm very, very cautious about, especially Americans deploying any troops or boots on the ground. I hope this thing ends. I hope that this thing ends fast, and I hope that people are brought to the negotiating table. But yeah, I think anyone my age who grew up with those two particular wars has little to no appetite with another engagement over the Middle East.
Yeah, I agree with you on that point. I don't think anybody wants to see boots on the ground. I guess where I am kind of caught is I wonder if perhaps the United States should supply those bunker busting bombs that would take out Iran's nuclear capabilities, the underground, to completely dismantle their progress. Now, that's an area where I'm like, listen, I don't want boots on the ground, but if we could help Israel out with a huge bunker busting bomb, I don't know. That to me, I think that needs to be on the table. What do you think?
I mean, I would push for diplomacy. I would push for them getting in the room and allowing President Trump some room to negotiate and maneuver, and hope and pray that they can get it done that way.
Yeah. Well, that's what the president wants. He doesn't want war. He doesn't want killing. He wants diplomacy. He's been very, very, very transparent about that, but he's also been very clear that Iran will not have a nuclear weapon. So I guess do with that what they will. I think Israel's doing a fantastic job, though. So I think they need to continue and do whatever they got to do to protect, their country. Their
I hope. I pray for the president. I hope that he can bring some peace to that entire area, and even over into Ukraine and Russia. I'm glad that he's stayed involved in some of those negotiations, and I just, I thought he had a great statement when he asked about the war. He's like, I want people to stop dying. I want blood to stop flowing. I want there to be peace. Like, everybody should want that, right? That should be a message that everybody can get behind. And I just hope that the administration stays involved and stays engaged, and bring, and again, hopefully brings about a peaceful resolution. I think that's what everyone wants. So.
Yep, and thank goodness we have a president that's awake more than between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. I guess that's what I'm grateful for. Thank you for being with me. Again, you don't sound like a Democrat to me, so maybe you should consider jumping on over to the right side of history, but that's for you to decide, not me. I'm just making an observation. I really appreciate you taking the time.
I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you. All right, folks, California lawmakers are once again talking out of their backsides, probably because it's much easier than cleaning up their crap hole state. It's time for final thoughts.
Yeah, if I can just elaborate, people covering their faces, impersonating police officers, it erodes trust in law enforcement and it undermines community safety. That's really what this bill is about. And I think many law enforcement officials, legitimate law enforcement officials, would welcome putting in safeguards to ensure transparency and accountability. And I think the concern is a lot that's happening. There are a lot of people who are engaged in these enforcement actions, and we don't know, are they federal, are they contractors, are they local law enforcement? And so we're requiring that people not have to wear masks except for some very limited exceptions, and that there be identifying information ensures that we know who is involved here. It's also critical to uphold our state and local laws, including our sanctuary law, SB 54, which says that local law enforcement are not going to be involved in immigration enforcement. So this is, I think, furthering the state's efforts to ensure legitimate law enforcement purposes and to protect Californians.
When he says protect Californians, he means illegal aliens. But yeah, California state idiots are back at it, this time with that bill that they have absolutely no jurisdiction over and cannot enforce. But hey, it sounded good to California Senator Scott Wiener as he was doing his daily Trump derangement morning affirmations in the mirror. So I guess here we are. It's the so-called No Secret Police Act, which again has no teeth because California or any other state has no authority or jurisdiction to regulate what federal law enforcement wears or does. But even so, it's an attempt to ban local, state, and federal law enforcement from covering their faces when interacting with the public. Scotty Boy now believes law enforcement officers shouldn't be allowed to protect their identities, but has yet to say anything about the mass rioters who are destroying LA with impunity and anonymity. It's also important to point out that Scott himself at least was a big mask guy. Wow, those are a lot of examples there, Scotty Boy. Scott doesn't get this because he's a Democrat and liberalism has rotted his brain, but ICE agents and other law enforcement officials aren't hiding their faces because they're ashamed of what they're doing. They hide their faces because your feral constituents dox them, threaten their families, and put targets on their backs simply for doing their jobs and enforcing the law. Democrats, man, whenever they have the chance to be for the men and women of law enforcement or something else, they always choose the something else. And it's the same way with America and Americans in general when it comes to Democrats. You'll notice they have never been such fierce defenders of you. The priorities are very clear, so vote accordingly. Those are my final thoughts. Please be sure to tune in live tomorrow again at 1 p.m. Eastern. Catch full episodes on Fox Nation whenever you like and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Tomi Lahren is Fearless. From Nashville, God bless and take care. Hey, thanks for watching. If you want more of my hottest takes, must-see conversations, and of course, my final thoughts, click here and make sure you subscribe here so you never miss a beat. I'll be here every weekday, and I hope you'll join me.